As I played through Saros, I repeatedly pondered how I would describe it to someone who isn't familiar with video games, or just isn't familiar with Housemarque's last title, Returnal. The best description I could muster was third-person Doom, except you're fighting aliens and moving 10 times as fast. That doesn't do it nearly enough justice, though, and Housemarque perfected Returnal's fast-paced combat formula, bringing back the core design decisions that made it so great, improving them, and adding new features that elevate their vision of a third-person bullet hell to an entirely new level. I've already mentioned it twice, and if I pointed out each instance where Housemarque took a feature or concept from Returnal and carried it forward into Saros, you'd get tired of the comparisons pretty damn quick. If you've played Returnal, you'll feel like Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at his TV a lot, as the bones of that title can be felt almost constantly here. Not in a cheap or reused way, but insofar as they are core to Housemarque's design philosophy, and in many cases, have evolved to become even better. Saros is a masterclass in frenetic, frantic, third-person combat, complex storytelling, and sensory design that absolutely blew me away, and is an early shoe-in for my personal game of the year. In Saros, you play as Arjun Devraj, a member of the Echelon 4 expedition, sent by the Soltari Corporation to the planet Carcosa. Your mission is to investigate the disappearance of 3 previous echelons, sent to extract Lucenite, an incredibly valuable alien resource with the potential for limitless energy. Coincidentally, one of the missing colonists just so happens to be Arjun's estranged wife, Nitya, who he is desperate to find, seemingly out of concern for her well-being amongst the disappearance of these previous expeditions. After being trapped by a crazed crewmate who sabotages their ship, Echelon 4 discovers that time moves very differently on Carcosa, and they are forced to contend with otherworldly powers exerting their influence on the planet. The investigation into those missing colonists, and why their comrades are going crazy, reminded me of the narrative setup behind Dead Space, a tragic tale of people going mad and then trying to understand why it all happened. Arjun is brought to life by Rahul Kohli, who puts on excellent voice acting and motion capture performances, perfectly embodying the wide range of emotions and behaviors behind this multi-layered and deeply flawed protagonist. Saros also features a cast of supporting characters, including the return of Jane Perry, who did an amazing job portraying Celine in Returnal, and puts forth an equally excellent performance as Echelon 4's commander, Sheridan. All of the voice actors nail their roles and delivery, conveying the fear, confusion, desperation, and insanity these characters face on Carcosa. Small bits of dialogue with Arjun's compatriots each time he returns to their base, the Passage, flesh out world building and progress the main plot, and the cast truly captures how each becomes warped over time. You get the sense it isn't a matter of if each member of Echelon 4 is going to break, but when and how. Arjun will occasionally bump into other survivors out in the wild, and these encounters have a particularly noticeable what the fuck factor, as you wonder how they survived while wandering these deadly locales. In Returnal, Celine was largely on her own, trapped with her thoughts, fears, and emotions all by herself, which was its own kind of effective storytelling, dripping in themes of isolation, loneliness, and horror. In Saros, conversing with the crew helps build Arjun's character in a way that is different, but no less effective than Housemarque's previous work. I appreciated the change in design and found it equally engaging and a great switch-up. Saros' story is also expanded with audio and text logs, along with environmental storytelling that all provide more clues about Carcosa, its inhabitants, and what happened to the 3 previous expeditions. Dystopian corporate undertones permeate this tale as well, and Soltari is far more concerned with Lucenite extraction than the well-being of its missing colonists, or the members of Echelon 4. The corporation is happy to withhold information, obfuscate their objectives, and employ operatives to advance their own agenda beyond any search and rescue directives. Soltari goals and authority supersede all others, as Primary, the company AI sent to oversee Echelon 4, is always quick to remind them. While Saros does sprinkle in some suspenseful and horrific moments, its story is not a reimagining of Celine's, with this narrative and accompanying visual motifs their own distinct body of work within Housemarque's portfolio. Without getting into spoilers, as this really is a tale you should experience yourself, this story features multiple endings that don't come along when or how you expect, but are definitely worth seeking out and seeing. It's a bit harder to discuss Housemarque's style of storytelling than your average video game, thanks to their unique style of narrative construction, featuring literal and metaphorical elements, often deeply intertwined. Much is left up to one's own interpretation, which is exactly what I imagine the developers intended. and the tale spun in Saros kept me searching for answers to its questions all the way through those final moments and beyond. Paired with that unique storytelling style is equally distinct visual and audio design, which absolutely blew me away. Saros looks, sounds, and feels incredible from its very first moments all the way through its final credits screen. This design is fucking crazy, with sound effects that are so heavy and chunky, and a visual style that is mysterious and foreboding during exploration, then transforms into an eye-blasting light show in combat, all while somehow remaining digestible and easy to instantly process. Housemarque's audio soundscape is so damn good, with effects that elicited the same amazement as listening to Dune in a movie theater, shaking your headphones and eardrums with deep, grating, booming noises that sound entirely alien and viscerally unsettling. Visual indicators are present during combat, but they're almost unnecessary thanks to immaculate spatial audio and specific cues, which are just that good. And you can practically pinpoint where each enemy is based on sound alone. From mechanical robotic bellowing to unnatural animalistic screeching, these help you easily identify which cadre of Carcosa's denizens you're facing off against next. This level of quality extends to environmental audio as well, and every inhuman screech you hear echoing in the distance immediately sets you on edge while also driving you forward to discover its source. Saros' soundtrack is equally excellent, as expected. Fast-paced tracks accompany hectic combat, epic songs blast as you face down fearsome bosses, and the eerie tones that play during exploration are simultaneously calming, but still slightly off-putting during those brief moments of downtime. Some of this music is so beautiful it gave me goosebumps, like haunting orchestral tunes that highlight beautifully constructed environments as you discover more about their creation and purpose. Housemarque's visual design is similarly incredible, starting with detailed character models. You can see Arjun's individual nose hairs for crying out loud. Their futuristic yet utilitarian suits clash perfectly with unnatural environments that often wriggle, quite literally, like a diseased parasite around them. Those environments are beyond stunning, and feature a huge range of locations that manage to convey both their beauty and foreboding all at once. This variety of locales features everything from ancient ruins and industrial complexes to religious institutions and even a poisoned swamp. Arjun explores a fortress that could have been ripped straight out of Mordor, with architecture that wants to reach out and angrily stab you itself, framed by the background of a partial solar eclipse, a sight that will become very familiar as you dive deeper into the depths of Carcosa. Gameplay effects are also breathtaking, as projectiles spew forth from weapons, beams and explosions saturate the screen, not to mention the hundreds of projectiles flying around these arenas at any given moment. These visuals always hit just right, like little clouds of shimmering particles that appear when defeating an enemy or picking up a health orb, and they constantly make you stop and admire their beauty while catching your breath after a fight. Speaking of fights, Saros' excellent gameplay is the perfect match for its presentation, and will have you on the edge of your seat, white-knuckling your controller from its very first moments and for hours after. Combat is based around Arjun's arsenal. Primary weapons are more traditional, like pistols, rifles, and shotguns, with crossbows and chakrams sprinkled in to spice things up. And these are paired with an alien arsenal of power weapons, like exploding bombs, energy beams, and railgun-like projectiles. One of each option is equipped at once, and both feature randomized traits from a pool specific to each weapon, including things like tracking projectiles, higher damage, and a slew of other unique benefits that guide one's loadout and playstyle. My favorites were the smart and tactical rifles, with perks that increase stagger buildup and power generation, the second of which has sadly been nerfed. This combo turned me into an unstoppable ball of destruction that tore through late-game encounters and bosses while barely breaking a sweat. Most weapons gradually fill up enemy stun meters while dealing damage, and when completely maxed out, will lock them in place momentarily, totally exposed to more damage or melee attacks that are particularly devastating in this state. Arjun's effectiveness can be increased further by hitting perfect reloads, activating the trigger at a precise moment that reloads your weapon much faster than usual, and boosts mag size and damage when paired with specific perks. Auto-hit is another combat mechanic, which generously helps your aim and projectile tracking. While this might feel cheap in other games, it's almost a requirement with all of Saros' fast-paced movement and frantic shooting. It feels like a fair tool that boosts your effectiveness without invalidating individual skill level. Trust me, you still need to be able to actually aim your weapon. Most options have this enabled. However, some do not, and require fully manual aiming, with the loss of that assistance offset by massively boosted damage, particularly against enemy weak points. Weak points are designated with a blue highlight and are susceptible to more damage when targeted. Spraying and praying can be a viable strategy, but targeting weak points, especially on bosses and when using specific weapons, makes fights feel much easier and rewards skilled aim. The marksman hand cannon is great at targeting those spots for extra damage, and the onslaught rifle can mow down enemies at close range, or switch to a slower cadence and hit those vulnerabilities with its alt fire mode. Each primary weapon has baseline functionality and a secondary mode, enabled by slightly depressing the left trigger, which modifies their behavior in ways like gradually increasing rate of fire, or more drastic changes like lobbing pellet grenades with a shotgun. Weapon variety across both categories is excellent, and this huge range of functionality and situational effectiveness, combined with various traits, allows for many different playstyles and approaches to conquering Saros' combat. Whether firing projectiles, activating alt-fire, or pulling the trigger down fully to enable your power weapon, each action taken with this arsenal is tuned to perfection. Even the game's starter hand cannon remained viable the entire way through, and was an option I returned to time and time again, thanks to its massively high potential for dishing out debilitating stagger damage. I definitely misjudged some of these choices at first, like shotguns and chakrams, which I initially wrote off but later realized were some of the deadliest weapons in the game. Chakrams, although more complicated in their usage, can delete entire rooms of enemies and boss health bars in a matter of seconds, especially when paired with some of the traits specific to their archetype. Shotguns were another weapon I enjoyed way more than anticipated. Beyond feeling and sounding incredible, they were extremely powerful, and that was before I understood the synergy of their high stun potential with melee damage. Melee attacks cut through enemy shields, but can also be upgraded to deal more damage to stunned enemies, which is super powerful. And that's before being able to teleport directly to staggered foes, ensuring you can finish them off while helping you jump around and avoid incoming damage. Getting aggressive with close quarters combat can be dangerous, but is so rewarding, especially once you've unlocked more of Saros' movement tech and can zip around arenas in the blink of an eye. Other combos like the repeater crossbow and Nova Lance, that railgun equivalent I mentioned earlier, just feel right, and obtaining fully kitted weapons in both slots makes you feel nigh unstoppable. On top of all that, you can also discover corrupted weapons, whose damage output scales corresponding to your level of corruption. More on that in a bit. This increases your lethality at the cost of fragility, enabling a glass cannon playstyle should you feel confident enough to try it. This was something I didn't even understand at first, despite the inclusion of detailed tutorials for every option in Arjun's arsenal and all corresponding combat components. Finding a new weapon was always exciting, and gave me an "I can't wait to see what this can do" feeling each time I stumbled across a new addition. And after almost 30 hours, there's still one option I haven't unlocked yet. Each weapon felt amazing, with incredible visual, audio, and sensory feedback, thanks to the PS5 controller's haptics. Even if some options took a minute to click, once that happens and you understand their potential, the act of wielding these tools to carve through Carcosa's roster of enemies feels sublime. Speaking of that roster, enemy variety is also excellent, and features ancient robots, mutated wildlife, and otherworldly Carcosan entities, all with their own unique weaknesses and movesets to master. Impressively, not one single enemy felt designed in a way that was cheesy or unfair, and this extends to both rank and file combatants, plus the game's bosses, which are an entirely different masterclass in design. Combatants are often paired with one another in ways that require a combination of different abilities and strategies to overcome, and almost never come at you without some kind of varied backup. These archetypes feed into and off of one another, as some rush in to attack up close, while others pepper you with projectiles from afar or shield their allies, and support-type enemies often need to be the highest priority targets. Aurelia, one of the game's mini-boss type enemies, was also one of the coolest and deadliest, with each of these more powerful varieties feeling unique and notably more dangerous than the foot soldiers they are often paired with. Even deadlier are elite enemies, denoted with a small icon indicating their tougher than usual status, and these fights always felt like little boss encounters, often cutting my run short before even reaching the actual big bad. Verticality and movement are key components of Saros' combat as well, and utilizing Arjun's tools to jump, dodge, grapple, and soar around these arenas is crucial to success, and I quite literally never found myself standing still. There were occasional instances of bullet sponge enemies, but only a couple of times, and these were more a product of not having the optimal loadout equipped for dealing with them than inherently poor design. When dispatched, foes can drop health pickups and Lucenite, the game's main upgrade currency, which does disappear after a short delay, incentivizing aggression and constant movement, preferably forward. Looking back on early clips, it's laughable to see how weak and uncoordinated I was compared to later on, when I would fly around arenas mowing down enemies almost effortlessly. I was in love with combat from the start, and only fell for it more with that gradual improvement over time, clearly felt through unlocking more abilities, mastering weapons, and becoming familiar with Carcosa's denizens. No matter what weapons you're using, which enemies you're fighting, or how difficult each encounter might be, Saros never falters in the incredible, heart-pounding action it provides. The topic of difficulty was a big point of contention with Returnal, and I've seen many stories over the years from those who struggled to make it past that game's first boss, not to mention actually beating it. I never struggled the same way. So talented, I know. But if you're worried about bouncing off Saros, a power fantasy of stomping enemies and imposing your will on them is certainly available, thanks to the meta progression systems Housemarque has added. One of these is the suspend cycle mechanic, which was also added to Returnal after its launch. You can quit out of the game at any point besides boss fights, then pick back up right where you left off next time around. Overarching progression is available immediately with the evolution of Arjun's power, and over time he'll gain access to upgrades like a grappling hook, upgraded melee attacks, and more that carry forward into all future runs. Saros' newer and much more extensive progression system is the Armor Matrix, which features a web of nodes unlocked by collecting Lucenite and Halcyon, two currencies found during each run. Arjun's effectiveness is based on three core stats, which correspond to health, power generation, and the rate at which Lucenite is obtained. All three are improved over time in the Matrix, along with several secondary stats and abilities. The cost of these upgrades scales further in, and this tree is fucking massive. It's nowhere near as intricate or complex, but it looks like something ripped straight out of Diablo or PoE, and there is so much to unlock. Whole nodes are dedicated to buffing specific gameplay elements like generating more healing drops, improving specific abilities, and losing less Lucenite after each death. Proficiency is one of those secondary stats, which gradually increases during each run and determines the level of weapon drops and their number of perks. This can be increased at baseline by the skill tree, allowing you to start at higher levels, which is incredibly useful in late-game zones, as obtaining strong weapons to keep up with more dangerous enemies is a prerequisite for success. Adrenaline levels are another carryover from Returnal, and scale from 0 to 5 based on defeating enemies without taking damage, which resets the counter completely. Each successive level grants new and more powerful bonuses, and the speed with which these tiers increase is also boosted by permanent upgrades. I slept on this at first, but hitting and maintaining max adrenaline is absolutely busted, and grabbing the perks to make it scale up faster is hugely important. Another new addition in Saros is Arjun's shield, which can absorb some incoming projectiles, recharging his power weapon energy in the process. The shield can be overloaded by taking too much damage or keeping it active for too long, so you can't just run around with it out all the time. Understanding when to deploy this protection instead of dodging was a bit of a learning curve, and threw me for a loop early on, but eventually became second nature and is near mandatory for overcoming certain encounters. You can also parry specific projectiles back at enemies to damage and stun them, and eventually gain access to Overdrive, your ultimate ability, which shoots out a projectile that deals massive damage, chunking down huge amounts of boss health or deleting entire arenas of enemies. Second Chance is another new addition, which allows you to self-revive once per run, unless refilled by completing a specific activity in each zone. This is hugely beneficial during boss battles in particular, even if only to prolong your first few attempts to better learn their moves before coming back to finish the job. Progressing the Armor Matrix is a robust undertaking, with specific upgrades locked behind Halcyon, a rare secondary resource, and new sections of the tree are blocked off until each successive boss battle is completed. Advancing the tree never felt like a grind though, and I was still netting enough Lucenite during late game runs to pick out more upgrades each time I'd return to the passage and primary. The inclusion of this system is an ingenious move by Housemarque to address some of the complaints centered around Returnal and its difficulty, and allows you to feel like your runs are never worthless, even while dying repeatedly to bosses or working through each new biome. After beating Returnal, you felt stronger thanks to its permanent upgrades and being tested by its gameplay, but always a little on edge and never fully comfortable while stepping out to explore Atropos. By the end of Saros, you do feel like a nigh untouchable god of death, noticeably more powerful than when you first stepped foot on Carcosa, but its core design also prevents you from attaining that god tier status all of the time. I do wish there was more to spend your Lucenite on once the armor matrix is maxed out, but maybe that's something we'll see added in a future update. Fingers crossed. When it comes to actually venturing out onto the surface of Carcosa, the same randomly generated tile set design awaits, combined with certain fixed areas in specific instances. You do start seeing repeated tiles fairly early on, but this is balanced out by new ones popping up far, far into the game, and I was still encountering fresh areas and challenges after 20 plus hours. These biomes all feature environmental obstacles and traversal puzzles to overcome, ranging from fairly simple hazards to multi-step sequences that require adept use of multiple mechanics. Traversal segments were always interspersed at the perfect pace to provide a nice reprieve from those heart-pounding combat encounters. Fairly simple, but still engaging while providing rewards that justified the extra effort. There are also plenty of optional side paths to explore, and deciding whether to press on towards your main objective or take a detour that could potentially yield a better weapon or crucial bit of healing is a frequent dilemma. Many of these side areas are sealed by locked doors, which require Carcosan keys to access, or blocked by upgrades that have yet to be attained. You will need to revisit old areas to discover everything they have to offer, ranging from new lore entries to upgrades and resources. And returning to an old location and seeing what I missed the first time around was always exciting. Similar to picking up a new weapon for the first time, each acquisition of a new traversal tool like your grappling hook feels like opening a shiny present, and reminds you of all the things you couldn't reach before. Many of the permanent increases to Arjun's max integrity and power are sealed off behind these previously inaccessible sections, so if you want to achieve his maximum potential, retreading old steps is a must. So many elements are inherent to this exploration: walls that can only be broken by power weapons, different types of barriers, or rooms with split-second decisions on what's more valuable, like a new weapon or refilling your health. There are a few concealed areas, but the map is very generous with showing available items, when new NPC conversations can be triggered, and other helpful indicators, which I love as a wannabe completionist. There are also mechanics specific to each zone, like collecting items in the fortress to unlock more rewards, or different traversal methods, like grasping hand-capped vines in the cathedral. Just be careful when you use them. Finally, there's the Eclipse mechanic, activated at altars in each zone, which transforms the world visually, adds more difficult enemies, new mechanics, and better rewards, basically upping the stakes across the board. New exploration opportunities only available during this world state are unlocked, and at certain points, triggering these more difficult segments is the only way to advance the main story. Eclipse-boosted enemies can now fire corrupted projectiles, which reduce your health pool until cleared by using your power weapon, a very rude awakening. Those changes to the world aren't just for looks either, and what was once a swamp filled with industrial waste now becomes filled with bubbling, festering pools of poison. Some traversal options are only available during this world state too, so for those looking to snag everything on Carcosa, the mechanic is unavoidable. Finally, an Eclipse grants access to Nightmare Strands. These short, optional sections feature negative modifiers and tougher enemies, but provide excellent rewards, including some permanent upgrades which can't be acquired otherwise. Defeating each boss unlocks a new checkpoint for fast travel, allowing quick jumps between and back to zones you've already visited, and helpful teleporters can also be found at specific points to cut down on retreading steps. Some zones kicked my ass pretty hard at first, but after running through them a few times, familiarizing yourself with their intricacies, and unlocking new upgrades along the way, even the most demanding gradually felt conquerable. Returning to these harrowing areas is no walk in the park though, late game locations in particular, and they still provide a noticeable challenge compared to the early game, even when fully kitted out. While exploring, you'll come across artifacts in addition to weapons, which provide stat boosts but can also come with negative modifiers. Some of these, like less lethality while standing still or taking fall damage, which is usually not enabled, are negligible if playing Saros the way it was intended. Others, like an increased dash cooldown, arguably your most important movement ability and a key component of success in combat, can be crippling, throwing a huge wrench in your muscle memory. I tried it once and said, no thanks, never again. Another consumable, the Acolyte's Wager, allows you to reroll weapons and artifacts, enabling the chance for that perfect upgrade or tool for your arsenal that will complete a specific loadout. Eventually, artifacts will also come with an increasingly high chance of applying volatility to one of your 3 core stats, which is a negative effect that remains until your next trip back to the passage. If your drive stat becomes volatile, all the Lucenite you've collected will be lost upon death, prompting a choice between pushing on if you're confident the upcoming boss fight is beatable, or cutting your run short to preserve the safety of your resources, another method of keeping your power level grounded. Saros' final area, which I don't want to spoil too much, is a perfect showcase of Housemarque's excellent design, and embodies what an endgame zone should be. Constant action, tons of rewards, traversal puzzles, plenty of heals to keep you going, and expansive tile variety that's constantly engaging. Despite some changes to let up on the difficulty, fans of that signature level of challenge will still find it available right from the start, and carried forward throughout the game thanks to other additions. The biggest of these are Carcosan modifiers, a system controlled by the player with any restrictions or benefits therein fully self-imposed. These modifiers can make each run easier or harder with different effects, like increasing incoming and/or outgoing damage, but only a certain number can be enabled at once, preventing the game from becoming a total cakewalk. However, if you ever feel stuck on a specific biome or boss for too long, or if you simply want more or less of a challenge when revisiting old content, this is a perfect, fully customizable method of achieving either of those outcomes. As you explore Carcosa, databank entries on the various enemies, locations, items, and characters you encounter will be decoded, with additional details revealed as you spend more time with each. Completing runs in each biome, defeating enemies, and using weapons will all expand their corresponding data, which in turn feeds into Saros' world building and lore, although much of this information is still obfuscated by design. Every gameplay element feeds into a cohesive feeling of overarching progression. A new zone is tough at first, but after a few runs you start acclimating and making progress. And by the end, you're blowing through it with almost no care in the world thanks to gained experience and additional upgrades. Sometimes, a fresh run starts off by finding your favorite weapon or an awesome upgrade, and you can feel in your bones that it's all going to come together and you're finally going to beat that boss or make it past the section you've been stuck on, which feels so damn good. Short, bad runs only happened a couple of times, and even when they did, I just wanted to get back out there and start another one right away, which is a testament to Housemarque's excellent gameplay design. A nice summary screen after each cycle provides a breakdown of stats from that run, and while helpful at first, I wish there was an option to disable it later, since it does become quite redundant after a certain point. There are a few outfit options Arjun can rock during this adventure, although these sadly seem to be only based on pre-order bonuses, with no additional looks unlocked through gameplay, which is a rare misstep. My biggest gripe with Saros is the activate 2 devices to unlock the next boss fight mechanic, which is one carryover from Returnal that I could have done without. I get it, this is one of those signature Housemarque design choices, and these instances felt like less of a slog as the game went on, but man, I forgot how much I hated these fucking button-pressing ordeals, especially when all I want to do is get back to the awesome boss fight they've been keeping me away from. Speaking of which, it's time to talk about Saros' bosses, which are fucking incredible, featuring one of the best rosters in any game I've played. I'm only going to show gameplay of the first starter boss because each of the following is such a spectacle and gameplay achievement that they deserve to be experienced fully blind, no spoilers or info beforehand. Many of these encounters I barely scraped through by the skin of my teeth, and each victory over these big-name combatants felt like an hours-long grudge match, and it had oftentimes been exactly that. As soon as the first boss fight kicked off, I said to myself, this is what I loved about Returnal so much, and that same feeling came back time and time again with each new encounter. All of these fights are mechanically challenging affairs paired with awesome, jaw-dropping and ear-popping visual and audio presentation, and are just so fucking cool in every possible way. Some are straight-up slugfests, while others feature traversal components in addition to avoiding the projectiles and attacks they hurl your way, ensuring your mobility skills are also tested. Some fights are noticeably more difficult if you roll up with specific weapons, but as your overall strength and prowess grows, nothing is impossible, and overcoming these enemies with a suboptimal loadout provides even more of an adrenaline rush than just blasting through them with your favorite gun. Saying these battles fly by at a million miles an hour would honestly be an understatement, and Housemarque's consistent ability to combine spectacle with substance is so incredibly impressive. As you uncover more of Arjun's story, the emotional and narrative impact of these encounters grows too, in addition to their complexity and mechanical requirements. And you'll be calling on every self-res, overdrive, and skill in your toolbox to get past these bosses. The final encounter is an absolute masterclass in all of those categories. Story implications, presentation, and the level of challenge you're forced to overcome all combine to create an experience that left me wanting to replay the fight immediately, after I calmed my pounding heart and shaking hands, of course. Most bosses took 3 to 5 attempts to overcome, with the hardest requiring no more than 10. Not extraordinarily hard by any means, but worthy challenges that I am still thinking about days later. The most challenging component of these fights isn't the difficulty of the encounters themselves, although these enemies are no pushovers, believe me, but the act of getting back to them after each death. This design was present in Returnal, having to go back and clear entire sections before even reaching the boss for another attempt. And while I wouldn't have minded more deviation from this in their latest entry, it's clearly core to Housemarque's design philosophy. That overarching progression is also present here, even when dying, and I repeatedly found myself thinking, okay, I made it to the next phase that time, I can go back and finally do this. Revisiting old bosses without difficulty modifiers enabled is almost laughably easy, and you're able to simply delete them from existence should you so choose. Although why you do this I'd never understand, since overcoming these challenges is the best part of Saros' phenomenal package. Housemarque are masters of bullet hell boss design, plain and simple, and there isn't one single thing I'd change about any of these immaculate encounters. After praising practically everything about Saros for however long it's been now, you're probably wondering, well, the game sounds great, but how does it run? That's a valid question, even more so than usual, considering all of the effects, models, and action happening on screen at any given moment. But I am pleased to report that very minor issues aside, Saros ran like an absolute dream. Returnal felt great to play 5 years ago, at the start of this console generation, but somehow, Saros manages to run smoother than butter. It wasn't the only reason I picked up a PS5 Pro before those nasty price hikes, but it paid off in droves. Despite all the on-screen visual complexity happening for the majority of your playtime, it ran pretty much flawlessly, and I experienced no issues at all during gameplay. There is an extensive settings menu, covering everything from gameplay tweaks to controller remapping to audio levels and visual indicators. And getting the game to look and handle exactly the way you like is no issue at all. There are no graphical settings, no performance or quality modes to switch between, but still a ton of other options for tweaking both functionality and presentation. Despite its near rock-solid performance, it was near rock-solid, and not entirely flawless despite running very well overall. There were a couple instances of weird shadows and textures not loading properly or glitching out, but only enough to count on one hand, and while slightly disorienting, never threw the excellent visual vibes off too much. I did encounter a handful of stutters, but never during combat or traversal, and oddly, the most frequent occurrences were when approaching a new section of each level, with the game stumbling for a second before catching up with itself. These were very infrequent, and never impacted gameplay, which is impressive considering the sheer amount of on-screen action popping off at any given moment. When it comes to bugs, there were a couple times enemies spawned out of bounds or behind a shield that was blocking off the next area, which could have been disastrous. I was always able to whittle down these partially removed enemies with a little finagling and luck, and never needed to restart a run when this came up. But Housemarque definitely needs to fix this so it doesn't ruin people's progress. Overall, Saros ran like a dream, which is all the more impressive considering its visual fidelity and what I imagine must be quite demanding technical considerations to allow such frenetic action to unfold so flawlessly. Saros had been sitting firmly towards the top of my most anticipated games since its reveal, and as a huge fan of Returnal, I fully expected Housemarque to deliver another third-person bullet hell masterclass, which they absolutely did. When I call this a masterclass, I really mean it. From top to bottom, Housemarque carried forward all the best parts of Returnal, improved them, and added even more features, resulting in a true evolution of their already established and excellent formula. Very minor gripes aside, Saros is a phenomenal product, and despite still offering that signature level of challenge, never left me frustrated or discouraged, only wanting to get back out there for one more run. This is exactly what I did after finishing the game too, and I've spent another 10 or so hours replaying old content, unlocking more items, and just basking in the glory of this experience. Saros took just over 25 hours to complete playing on the base difficulty, with no modifiers enabled. And each of those hours was filled with wonder, excitement, and heart-pounding adrenaline rushes that few other titles can provide. Shelling out $70 for a video game still doesn't feel right to me, and probably never will, but Saros is one of those rare gems that I have no qualms with recommending to anyone out there. Veterans of Returnal will find another worthy challenge filled with familiar combat, exploration, and mysterious storytelling, while those unfamiliar with Housemarque's previous work will find a more welcoming jumping-off point that showcases exactly why so many hold its predecessor in such high regard. So, with all that being said, I wholeheartedly recommend Saros to anyone out there, and I'll be waiting with bated breath once again for whatever Housemarque decides to cook up next. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more gaming content, and let me know your thoughts on Saros in the comments below. If you've played it already, did Housemarque's follow-up to Returnal nail its landing the same way it did for me? Or does this bullet hell seem a little too hellish for your taste? Regardless, thank you for watching. You're a real one and I appreciate you, and hope to see you again in the next one. Catch you later!